Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Boom, boom, boom. The three-body life exploded. The entire Centaur constellation seemed to tremble in an instant, and a terrifying energy filled the entire universe. At that moment, Yi-Bei's body was suspended in the air. The system's voice sounded in his mind urgently. And quote, "Host, danger. The three-body life form is a 10th grade life form. Its explosion can annihilate an area of space, and its energy is 1,000,000,000,000 times that of a nuclear bomb. With the host's body's condition, it is still unable to withstand it. I suggest that the host hide in the spatial fragments." End quote. The system's voice was very calm. This made Yi-Bei feel rather strange. If there was really danger, he and the system were one. If he was dead, the system would be dead too. If there really was danger, the system should be very anxious. System, to be honest, if I were to continue staying here and face that level of explosion, what are the chances of me winning? Also, if I were to devour the energy from the explosion, what would I gain? Yi-Bei asked decisively. If he wasn't crazy, he wouldn't be a demon. If he wanted to become more powerful, he had to pay a certain price. The explosion of 3 lives was a very good opportunity. As expected, when Yi-Bei asked this question, the system immediately replied, end quote, "With host's current body, you can last for about a second in this kind of explosion. If you can devour this kind of explosion storm, your body will receive a huge upgrade. At least in the future, you will be able to withstand the most powerful attack of a level 10 creature." End quote. After hearing this, Yi-Bei's eyes instantly lit up. As long as he could withstand the explosion, he would be able to completely ignore the attacks of level 10 creatures in the future. This level of advancement was definitely extremely objective. "Let's go all out," Yi-Bei said in a low voice. Bullet time. When he saw the 3 body creatures around him explode one after another, Yi-Bei let out another low growl and activated bullet time. The originally boiling universe seemed to have become silent at this moment. When the 3-body life forms exploded, their movements became full of cameras, and the 3-body life forms that were running away also slowed down a lot. But after bullet time was activated, countless 3-bodied creatures immediately detected Yi-Bei's situation. That guy disappeared? It disappeared into thin air without any spatial fragments appearing. How did it do that? A 3-body being spoke, his voice filled with surprise. Yi-Bei was the leader of the snake tribe civilization. In reality, when these 3-body life forms surrounded him, they had been locking onto him. End quote. He didn't go to the space fragment to hide, but the other monsters have all gone in. Moreover, I can sense his aura. He's still in space and hasn't disappeared. Perhaps he's too fast, so we can't detect him. End quote. Slow it down by 100 times. It's no use, there's still nothing. 8,000 times. No, I didn't. 10,000 times. There's a golden shadow. Bastard, this guy is so fast. 100,000 times. I see him, I see him. Is this guy really not afraid of death? He's actually in that space. Moreover, he's charging in the direction of a self-destructing 3-body life form. What does he want to do? At this moment, all the 3-body creatures that were running away felt an unprecedented shock. They couldn't figure out Yi-Bei's actions at all. At that moment, Yi-Bei's body was moving through space at an unbelievable speed in bullet time. Roar, roar. He opened his mouth to the maximum. His body had grown to a length of 10,000 meters. His golden body was filled with dominance in space. Devour, devour everything. I'm taking all of this energy. As he advanced at high speed, Yi-Bei continued to mumble excitedly. Boom, boom, boom. The first 3-body life form exploded. Sound waves couldn't be transmitted in space. However, that terrifying energy seemed to echo directly in the depths of Yi-Bei's heart, wave after wave. It was as if the entire world was about to collapse. The shock wave was too strong. Crack, crack, crack. In an instant, Yi-Bei felt as if the bones in his body couldn't withstand the pressure and began to crack and break. Even the indestructible snake skin on the surface of his body began to crack under the shock waves of the explosion. Pain. A heart-piercing pain. This was the first time Yi-Bei had felt such pain since he had become a giant sky-devouring python. But This pain didn't make Yi-Bei cower in the slightest. Instead, it filled his body with fighting spirit. The surface of his body was covered in blood. He opened his mouth. He allowed the shock waves of the explosion to enter his mouth. Then, a miraculous scene appeared. On one hand, Yi-Bei's body was constantly being destroyed by the shock wave, and even his bones were exposed. On the other hand, as Yi-Bei frantically devoured the explosive energy and rapidly converted it, his body was recovering at a terrifying speed. Under bullet time, this second was extended infinitely. But on the other side, the three body life forms that were running away were communicating with each other through their consciousness. I've already locked onto that Python's position. It's in the core area of the self-destruction, and even we three body life forms don't dare to come into contact with such an explosion. According to his biological level, he's definitely dead. A three-body being made a solemn vow. Right, he's dead. End quote. As long as that guy is dead, these monsters are nothing to be afraid of. Killing them will be a piece of cake. End quote. I hope so. Be patient. The three-body creatures that had escaped said one after another. It had to be said that their change was very strange. In the beginning, the creatures on Earth were just under their control and they could kill them whenever they wanted. Now, things had changed. As level 10 creatures, they were actually afraid of creatures on Earth. However, all the three-body life forms agreed with these words. Hoo. Chi. In space, Yi-Bei couldn't be bothered to pay attention to these three-body life forms. At this moment, his body was crazily receiving the baptism of the explosive storm. The terrifying storm was completely shattered by the surface of his body, revealing the terrifying white bones. However, in the next moment, it recovered. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. In just 1 second, the number of times he had collapsed and recovered had reached a terrifying number of more than 10,000 times. Who knew what kind of terrifying things Yi-Bei had experienced in that 1 second? But just as 1 second was about to pass in bullet time, and an even more terrifying explosion was about to occur, the system's voice sounded again. Host, the location of the Flood Dragon's body has been discovered. Do you wish to proceed? Flood Dragon. Hearing this, Yi-Bei's body trembled violently. In another galaxy in the universe, a planet made entirely of metal was suspended in the air. And NBSB, the cold, mechanical voice spoke once more. End quote. It has been confirmed that the Milky Way has been attacked by the three-body civilization and has completely disappeared from the universe. However, we just received the latest life signal. In the Centaur constellation, a large number of other life forms have been found. Those are not owned by the three-body civilization, and those life forms are very similar to the life forms in the Milky Way. End quote. End quote. That means the life in the Milky Way galaxy avoided the dimension-lowering attack and through some special means, directly arrived at the Centaur constellation from the Milky Way and started a war? Something like that. End quote. Continue to observe. Also, find an opportunity to meet those creatures. End quote. I got it. The voice disappeared. Of course, other than these, the space snakes didn't stay idle either. Whoosh. The space snakes that were originally advancing quickly in the universe felt the disappearance of the Milky Way. At this moment, they also took action. End quote. Change our target. We're going to the centaurs. End quote. End quote. Those creatures on Earth have too much potential. If we can control them, they will definitely be a great help. End quote. This time we can't fail. End quote. I felt an extremely terrifying energy fluctuation just now. If I'm not mistaken, it was a three-body self-destruction or something. It seems that the creatures on Earth are still very powerful. At least, they can make the three-body life forms suffer. End quote. Let's continue forward. We'll know when we get closer. And NBSB, whoosh. In the universe, the speed of the space snake was extremely fast. At this time, in the centaurs, at the core of the three-body life form, Yi-Bei's body trembled violently when he heard the system's words. He had gone through so much trouble to come to the Centaur constellation, ignoring the consumption of his mental strength. It was definitely not just to devour these three-bodied life forms. His real goal was the Flood Dragon's body. With his current body strength, how terrifying would he be if he evolved into a Flood Dragon? Even Yi-Bei didn't expect this. Since we've confirmed the location, of course we have to go. What's the delay? Yi-Bei growled. However, the system didn't do as he said. Host, you are currently in the midst of an explosion and cannot leave normally. First, you should settle this place. After that, the system fell silent and didn't speak anymore. Chi. Yi-Bei didn't dare to delay. The following explosion was the most terrifying. A twisted space instantly appeared in front of him. Without much thought, Yi-Bei dove straight into it. Boom, boom, boom. The explosions continued in space. However, when the three-body life form completely exploded, the power it produced far exceeded Yi-Bei's imagination. Walala. In the forest of death, countless living trees were shaking their branches crazily. In the past, when Yi-Bei entered the forest of death, they would definitely behave themselves and not dare to make any moves. But today, things were completely different. In fact, when Yi-Bei entered the forest of death, he had also felt that something was wrong. It was dangerous. Yes, it was the feeling of danger. But at this time, they were clearly already in the forest of death. What was going on? Yi-Bei didn't have time to think too much. As his mental power spread out, Yi-Bei immediately knew what was going on. Boom, boom, boom. In the universe, the three-body life form exploded completely, finally displaying the horror of a level 10 creature. The explosion actually tore the space in this part of space. Damn it, I've underestimated them. Yi-Bei was entrenched in the forest of death. Crack, crack, crack. In his line of sight, Yi-Bei could clearly see that, at this moment, cracks had appeared one after another in the sky of the originally extremely solid forest of death. On top of that, the cracks were constantly emitting cracking sounds, like glass breaking. Not good. End quote, die? End quote, Yi-Bei shouted. The spatial fragment might be a very good place to take refuge. But this did not mean that it was absolutely safe. When his strength reached its peak, it could completely shatter the space fragments. Right now, Yi-Bei was facing such a situation. System, didn't you say that the dead space is an extremely safe space fragment from the universe? Why were they affected by the explosion? Yi-Bei's expression was extremely grave as he spoke to the system in a cold voice while thinking of a way to deal with the shattered space. And quote, this is very normal. Although the Cosmos bag was taken from a safe and stable universe, the host is currently using it at all times. You even opened it just now. When the impact reaches a certain level, it is completely possible to tear open this stable space. The host, you can deal with it on your own. With your current strength, you will not die. End quote. The system replied indifferently. No death? Damn it. Yi-Bei cursed angrily in his heart, but he didn't have the time to continue chatting with the system. Crack, crack. Outside, in the universe, the three-body life form self-destructed, and the terrifying power was completely released. In the forest of death, the Kacha sounds continued. Then, Yi-Bei could clearly see that the entire forest of death was actually beginning to collapse. The space around him was crazily shattering. Walala. The living trees inside, after sensing the danger, shook even more crazily. Even the space tree, which was full of space fragments, began to feel uneasy. Under the impact of this violent energy, the space fragments above also felt like they would collapse at any time. Countless living beings hiding in the space fragments were also trembling. End quote. It seems like it's impossible to pass through safely. End quote. In the forest of death, Yi-Bei saw the space shatter. As he lay in the shattered space, he could even see the situation in the universe. Roar, roar, roar. He kept growling. Whoosh. Then, an extremely shocking scene appeared. At that moment, Yi-Bei, whose entire body was golden, was covered in bright red flames. The surrounding temperature instantly rose to more than 1,000 degrees. The flames crackled, as if a special effect had been added to Yi-Bei's 10,000-meter-long body. It looked extremely shocking. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. Whoosh. When his body was engulfed in flames, a terrifying electromagnetic force also wrapped around him. Then, Yi-Bei's body quickly rose into the air. He was actually trying to use his body to block a portion of the shock wave generated by the explosion. This method was simply too crazy. And as Yi-Bei rushed out, The mutated beasts, Morpheus, and the others in the various spatial fragments were all shocked. At the same time, they quickly reacted and discussed a plan. Not good. The king is going to face that explosion. The golden lion roared. What do we do? King is very powerful, but that explosion can even penetrate space. It'll be bad if something happens to him. Caesar was also very anxious. No, we have to go out and help. Chi. Wang Wen flicked his tongue and prepared to rush out of the space fragment. However, at this moment, Morpheus also spoke. And quote, according to the current situation, the explosion of 3 days of life actually broke through the spatial barrier and caused great damage to the entire forest of death. In fact, the king still has a way, and that is to hide in the spatial fragment we are in. However, if we do that, the forest of death might suffer irreparable damage, so the king chose to use his body to block the shock wave. End quote. Morpheus' analysis was absolutely rational. Then, what should we do? Neo asked. If I'm not wrong, the king is doing this to use his body to block the impact of the explosion of the three-bodied life form. What we need to do is to release all the warships and let them take part of the force. In addition, it's best to let the living trees in the forest of death move as well. As long as their roots are still there, they will definitely not die. Morpheus was very cold. Silence. The apostles and Neo's eyes lit up when they heard the plan. Roar. Even Yi Bei's eyes lit up as he charged toward the sky. End quote. Living plants immediately form a barrier and protect the entire forest of death. Also, the surface of your bodies must be the toughest. End quote. Yi Bei quickly gave his orders as he released his mental domain. And NBSB, whoosh whoosh whoosh. At this time, countless battleships of the Snake Tribe civilization also rushed out of the space debris and rushed into the sky. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. The explosion began. Yi Bei was at the forefront of the group. When the terrifying power crashed into him, half of his body was instantly reduced to ashes. However, a portion of the power was devoured, and Yi Bei's body began to recover rapidly. In the distance, in space, and NBSB, whoosh. The three-bodied creatures that were running away frantically only stopped and panted heavily after they were certain that they had reached a safe position. However, at this moment, they were all very cold and excited. End quote. The self-destruction of our three-body life forms can not only destroy the space, but also the space fragments within it. That guy is dead for sure, end quote. Right? I really can't think of any reason for him to live. End quote. When the explosion started, the garbage that was on our bodies all returned through the space debris. Now, I guess they finally know fear. End quote. The biological level can never be crossed. You don't even understand this. How sad. End quote. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. They said as they observed the explosion in space. 1 minute. 2 minutes. The explosion's most powerful energy fluctuation lasted for less than 0.1 seconds, but the effect was continuous. Moreover, it wasn't just one three-body life form that exploded. There were dozens of them. The space collapsed completely. From a distance, an incomparably terrifying vortex was formed within it. It was pitch black. No light was revealed. It was many times more terrifying than a black hole. He couldn't even sense any life aura from it. It was no wonder that these three-body creatures felt that Yi Bei definitely couldn't survive. Even with the exception of the three-body creatures. In the depths of the universe, the other races felt the same way. Those three-body life forms actually self-destructed. It looks like all those creatures on Earth are dead for sure. Don't they realize that they're all rich resources? This group of idiots. The space snake growled in anger. However, even though he knew about this situation, he did not stop. If he didn't personally see the self-destructing scene and the disappearance of those mutated beasts, the space snakes definitely wouldn't let this go. Because he had transmitted this incident to the minds of every space snake through his psyche force, and there was no way out. On the metal planet. And NBSB, whoosh whoosh whoosh. A metallic life form streaked across the sky and turned into a light spot, charging toward the centaurs at super light speed. And quote, if the creatures on Earth are finished, the three-body civilization will also have to pay the price. End quote. The voice was cold and mechanical, but it carried an extremely terrifying aura. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. As time passed, the three-bodied creatures in the centaurs became more and more excited. We won. Ha ha ha. End quote. The three-body civilization is indeed the strongest. End quote. End quote. Now that you've opposed the three-body civilization, you've finally tasted our power. End quote. End quote. It's a pity. Many tri-body life forms were sacrificed to deal with this kind of trash. This is a disgrace and a warning. Everyone, remember, any species with potential must be controlled immediately in the future. We must not give them any hope of development. It is already very difficult for our tri-body civilization to control the centaurs. If another powerful civilization appears, our status will be greatly reduced. The universe is too dangerous. End quote. Yes, these three-body creatures were cheering and reflecting. But just when they thought that everything was over. Chi. In the distance, the terrifying black hole in space gradually began to disappear. About half an hour later, the vortex had completely disappeared. The space was not completely annihilated. In the center of the vortex, there was a huge tree. This tree was too big and extremely shocking. Its height was at least 100,000 meters. The roots were even more dense and wriggled continuously, as if they were directly rooted in the void of the universe. Apart from that, the tree glowed with a metallic luster, as if it was indestructible and indestructible. Furthermore, while it was floating in space, its body was still growing at a crazy speed that could be seen with the naked eye. In the distance, the three-body creatures were all stunned. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. Then, his body began to tremble violently. Isn't this the universe tree? Why did they appear here? Shouldn't they be living on the planet? Now, it can directly take root and sprout in the universe. Something's wrong. Look, there's something moving on that tree. It's that snake. He didn't die, and the universe tree didn't hurt him. At this moment, the entire centaur constellation was filled with a strange aura. The universe was vast and endless. There were countless civilizations in the universe. There were high-level and transcendent ones. There were also extremely weak. However, regardless of whether they were from a high-leveled civilization or a weak civilization, there were three types of living beings that they absolutely could not touch. The first, and also the strongest, was called Universe Tree. Its existence was to constantly destroy the universe because the universe tree could endlessly reproduce and devour. It could destroy one planet after another and turn them into nutrients for its own survival. It simply couldn't be killed or destroyed. The second type was the Zerg. The true bug race was extremely powerful and had countless different branches. Each branch was led by a queen mother. Trillions of bugs all obeyed the queen mother's orders. They were roaming the universe. Their reproduction rate was extremely fast. They would devour all life-preserving planets or living beings that they saw and turn them into their own energy. They would then split into new Zerg empresses and repeat the process in the entire universe endlessly. The third type was the automaton race. As long as there was enough metal, these mechanical life forms could rely on segments of intelligent programs to recover at the fastest speed and continuously reassemble. Assuming that out of 1 trillion intelligent life forms, if only one of them was not destroyed in a war, it would not take long for them to be resurrected again. Learning from the lessons of the war, not only would their numbers increase by several times, but their combat power would also continue to increase. The machine race was also an undying existence. However, now, the fleeing three-body life forms looked at the living tree floating in space in a daze. The universe tree had appeared. The creatures in the snake race civilization were not much different from the insect race. To a certain extent, their potential was even stronger than the insect race. The two races seemed to have merged now. It was terrifying enough to think about it. What do we do? And quote, that's really a universe tree. This thing is scary, but in the universe, any civilization that sees it will try to destroy it. Everyone, calm down. Fear has no effect. End quote. End quote. No, this tree can produce endless flowers and fruits. Even if we destroy it, once its seeds spread in the centaurs, the entire constellation will be doomed. End quote. Think of a way quickly. The three-body creatures were truly terrified. Perhaps they were not afraid of the mutated beasts. However, they had no choice but to believe the legend of the Universe Tree. Moreover, what he was worried about really happened. Just as they were saying these words, in the void of the universe, the big tree had grown to more than 1 million meters. At the same time, bright red flowers bloomed on the trunk. There were at least 100 million of them, and each flower was releasing a terrifying aura. On the giant tree, Yi Bei's golden body was coiled up. Although he had suffered unprecedented pain after taking on the energy from the self-destruction of so many three-body life forms, the energy he had devoured was also extremely terrifying. At that moment, Yi Bei's body had doubled in length, reaching 20,000 meters. He stuck out his scarlet forked tongue. As he wrapped himself around the living tree, his body released a terrifying killing intent, but at the same time, his eyes also flickered with unprecedented excitement and agitation. The effect of absorbing the power of this explosion is completely unexpected. Although the Forest of Death was severely damaged, after the explosion, the space returned to normal. The most joyous thing is that the living plant was at the front of the explosion and absorbed the extremely powerful power. It actually directly produced an increase in the creature's level and evolution. Yi Bei muttered to himself. At this moment, the Forest of Death was closed again. Apart from wasting a large number of battleships, the mutated beasts were all fine. All the living plants became more powerful after absorbing the energy. In addition, Yi Bei also discovered that the living tree he had casually conjured could actually absorb the power generated from the explosion of the three-body life form in the air, and it grew rapidly in the air. All of these things had far exceeded Yi Bei's expectations. He saw a living tree that was 1 million meters tall. Flowers bloomed all over his body. Yi Bei knew that the centaurs were completely finished today. End quote. System, can you tell me the exact location of the flood dragon now? Yi Bei sat there. His spiritual power domain spread out and roughly scanned the three-body life forms in the distance. At this moment, with his physical fitness and strength, the three-body life forms that had posed a certain threat to him before were no different from ants in his eyes. Right now, the only thing Yi Bei cared about was where the flood dragon's body was. End quote. The flood dragon's body is in the Strategic Resources Department of the three-body civilization. It's about a light year away from here, and there are many three-body beings protecting it. There are also countless more powerful technologies. The system's voice rang out, and at the same time, a set of specific coordinates appeared in Yi Bei's mind. Originally, Yi Bei was extremely unfamiliar with the centaurs, and he had no idea where to go. But when the coordinates appeared, Yi Bei realized that he was extremely familiar with the entire centaurs. Even if he closed his eyes, he knew where to go. Very good. After finding the coordinates, Yi Bei's anticipation grew. Buzz. However, in the next second, Yi Bei's gaze changed, and he immediately looked in the direction that the three-bodied creatures had fled in. The body of a flood dragon was important. But the self-destruction of those guys had caused Yi Bei unprecedented pain. If he were to leave just like that, it would obviously not be Yi Bei's style. End quote. Before I find the body of the flood dragon, the most important thing is to eat all these guys. It can be considered as compensation. End quote. Chi. Yi Bei flicked out his scarlet forked tongue. After that boiling, killing intent gushed out. In the next second, he didn't hesitate at all. He brought that 1-million-meter-tall living tree and quickly rushed in the direction of those three-body creatures. And MBSB, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. His body drew a black shadow in the universe. His speed was too fast, faster than the speed of light. There was no reflection at all. Not good. He's coming. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. Damn it. He's too arrogant. What do we do? End quote. Let's continue the war. We can't escape. If we don't destroy the universe tree, the centaurs will definitely be finished. End quote. It's blossoming, and it's about to bear fruit. We can't let its fruit scatter in the universe. It was true that, when faced with the survival of the entire star constellation, these three-body creatures didn't retreat when they saw Yi Bei charging at them. Instead, they looked as if they were ready to fight, in the depths of the universe. And MBSB, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The space snakes were still rushing forward. Of course, during this process, their mind power was at its maximum state. They could observe every move in the entire Centaur constellation from the Emperor's point of view. The self-destruction of the three-body life form completely crushed the space. The space snakes originally thought that the snake civilization was doomed. However, when they saw the universe tree in the void and the golden python on the tree, they were stunned again. Those creatures on Earth, facing the explosion of a level 10 life form, still didn't die? And a universe tree appeared in the void. How could such a thing appear in our universe? The space snake that was the first to discover the universe tree exclaimed in shock. The universe tree. That was also an existence that he feared. In fact, it wasn't just the space snakes that were shocked. When the giant tree that was 1,000,000 meters tall appeared in the Centaurs, countless races in the dark were terrified. At the same time, in the Centaurs, Walhalla, as eBay charged toward the three-body life forms, countless vortexes appeared on the 1,000,000-meter-tall tome. It was too terrifying. These universe trees are different from the ones in the information. How could a space vortex appear above? Could this tree have fused with a space fragment? But that's impossible. How did he do it? Unbelievable. When the three-body creatures saw this, they all began to make a fuss. A twisted vortex appearing on a living plant was completely beyond their logic. In fact, eBay hadn't expected this to happen. When the three-body creature exploded, countless living trees suffered the impact. The living tree with the spatial fragment hanging from it was no exception. However, after the impact ended, the living tree absorbed all the spatial fragments. But the things inside the spatial fragment didn't change at all. Moreover, eBay could still communicate with the mutated beasts in the spatial fragment at any time. Apart from that, there was another feeling. eBay discovered that he seemed to have become one with the living tree. He could control the tree with just a thought. He could even make the tree do anything he wanted. This was also the result of eBay bringing the living tree out of the forest of death. Then, he placed it in space to continue devouring the residual energy produced when the three-body life forms exploded. As it turned out, eBay's method was very good. The power displayed by the living tree was completely beyond his expectations. It directly grew to a height of 1,000,000 meters. From the moment you destroyed the Milky Way, there was no more room for negotiation. Today, you will all become food for our civilization. Chi. eBay was extremely fast as he growled. Wallalala. Countless mutated beasts surged out of the living tree. When the three-body creature exploded, the mutated beasts also absorbed a lot of energy. When they came out, they were several times stronger than before, both in size and strength. You bastards, you're dead. I'll definitely devour all of you today. Puff, 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 puff. The Blood Moon's body was now more than 5,000 meters in diameter. When it spread its wings, it looked like it could cover the sky and the sun in space. After saying this, his body turned into a shadow in the next second and quickly rushed in the direction of a three-body life. Roar, 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 this is too good. I feel like I can become even stronger today. It's been a long time since I've had a full meal like this. The golden lion roared. At this moment, the silver-white hair on his body became even brighter. Even in the dark universe, it was still emitting a dazzling light. I feel like I can swallow an entire planet. Wangwen flicked his tongue. As one of the earliest creatures to follow eBay, he had evolved a lot along the way. Now, his body had reached 12,000 meters. He looked terrifying, like a dragon floating in space. When he said this, his eyes were filled with excitement and anticipation. Reproduction. Attack. Quickly. End quote. There are too many resources. If we can eat them, it will definitely be great. End quote. Get out of the way, let me go first. As for the other mutated beasts, they were all extremely excited. When they looked at the three-body life forms, there was no fear at all. Instead, it was replaced by appetite. They had devoured some before, and it was clear that they had tasted the benefits, so they were all eager. What's going on? I have a very bad feeling about this. These guys seem to have become stronger. Not good. Strengthen the defense and attack. We can't let them get close. End quote. Don't worry about the energy reserve. Just use it as much as you can. End quote. Those three-body life forms were 10th-level life forms, After all, although they were extremely shocked, they were still able to maintain a certain level of calm. Chi chi chi. As the voice fell, each and every one of them began to charge their energy frantically. The positron cannon, space-shattering cannon, the miniature black hole cannon. At this moment, the three-body life forms no longer cared about their energy reserves. They frantically launched their most powerful weapons. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. Whoosh, whoosh. In an instant, the entire centaurs and the universe were filled with terrifying storms. Uft, uft. Many of the mutated beasts that had come out of the vortex space had suffered such attacks. Some of them had died from the direct attacks, but most of the mutated beasts had opened their mouths wide and devoured the attacks. As he advanced, he became stronger. This is crazy. These monsters are crazy. They can even devour attacks. As long as it's energy, they can devour it. What should we do? Quickly think of a way. The three-bodied creatures were finally anxious when they saw the mutated beast getting closer and closer. They were scared, really scared. Any living being, no matter how powerful they were, would be like this when facing death. But Yibei had already made up his mind. There was no use in being afraid. Uft, uft, uft. In the blink of an eye, the entire universe was engulfed by a terrifying, devouring sound. But just as Yibei was leading the mutated beasts in a frenzy to devour the demonic beasts, in another space in the centaurs, a huge body lay in a gloomy place. Buzz. Buzz. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. If one were to look closely, they would find that the body was still able to twist from time to time. It was not dead at all. Yes, that body was a flood dragon. Buzz. At this moment, he was lying in space with his eyes wide open. Roar. In the air, the flood dragon opened its eyes wide and let out a low roar. Crack, crack, crack. This roar was actually not very loud. He even felt weak. However, after the sound was heard, the originally cold, deep, and boundless void actually cracked and shattered like glass under this sound. However, this space was extremely special. The surroundings seemed to be enveloped by some kind of restriction, and his voice did not spread out. Otherwise, what had happened here would definitely have resounded throughout the entire low-tier universe. Just a roar could shatter the surrounding space and create terrifying space fragments. If this guy attacked with all his might, the entire low-tier universe might collapse and become fragments. Who is it? This feeling of uneasiness. It was the first time it had appeared. How could there be something that could threaten me in a low-tier universe? After the low roar ended, the flood dragon slowly spat out these words. His eyes were filled with a cold aura. However, he was too weak. When he came to this universe, his body was even seriously injured. Otherwise, he would have left long ago. However, this feeling of uneasiness only lasted for a short while. Soon, he calmed down, narrowed his eyes, and fell into a deep sleep again. He had lived for too long and experienced too much. He didn't believe that there was really an existence that could threaten him in this low-level universe. His premonition just now must have been an illusion. The flood dragon moved. The three-body creatures did not notice this at all. Yibei and the mutated beasts, who were frantically devouring the three-bodied creatures, also didn't notice anything. This is too good. Roar, roar, roar. You guys, continue to self-destruct. This taste is so delicious. And quote, power, energy, I feel like I can keep getting stronger. Haha. End quote. End quote. The taste of three-body life is really not bad. End quote. On the other side, hundreds of billions of mutated beasts attacked crazily. Whenever they landed on a triple-bodied life form, they would devour it crazily. At the same time, they kept making excited sounds. As for the three-body creatures, they were indeed very powerful, but their weaknesses were too obvious. Think about it. An elephant must be stronger than an ordinary ant, right? However, if that ant were to climb onto an elephant's body and eat its meat, the elephant would not be able to do anything to the ant. This was the current situation. A three-body life form was too massive. When the mutated beasts ran onto their bodies, they were no different from ants. The three-bodied creatures were completely helpless in this situation. The most terrifying thing was that these ants were not ordinary ants. Each of their teeth was very good and could even devour an endless amount of food. The scene was extremely miserable. The three-body life forms fought back with all their might. As for the Milky Way, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The three-body creature that went on the expedition had also discovered the situation in the centaurs. At this moment, they all stopped in space. Its huge body could not help but tremble slightly. The creatures in the Milky Way possess technology that we don't know about, and they can devour anything and grow stronger at the fastest speed possible. They can even transform the power of our self-destruction. Other than that, their reproduction speed is not much slower than the Zerg. Everyone, even if we go back now, we can't do anything. The voice of a three-body being was a little hoarse. Don't tell me we're also going to carry out dimension reduction attacks on the Milky Way? A life suggested. Stop joking. That's my hometown. Even if they all die in battle, it's impossible to destroy our own home. Moreover, we've already launched a dimension reduction attack on the Milky Way previously, and the result is obvious. Those creatures are not afraid at all. If we use it a second time now, the one who will suffer the ultimate loss will be us. Then, what should we do? What can we do? Those fellows have already risen to power. We are no longer treating them as targets for slaughter. Instead, they are treating us three-body beings as food. Everyone, you must be aware of this. Then, do you still remember the most central part of our memory core? It was left to us by our ancestors thousands of years ago. At that time, they said that if our race were to encounter a destructive disaster, we can open the core fragment and be saved. What? What's this? When the suggestion was made, all the three-body creatures were stunned. The knowledge of the three-body civilization was accumulated over the generations. In the memories of the current few generations, there was a secret area. It was impossible to check under normal circumstances. It was also a forbidden area for all three-body life forms. In fact, for so many years, no three-body life form had tried to open that secret. If it wasn't for the mention of life, most of them would have forgotten about it. Yup. Do we open the secret now? End quote. Based on the current situation, the three-body civilization is indeed suffering a devastating blow. The universe tree has appeared. Even if all the monsters die, the universe tree can still destroy the entire centaurs. End quote. Then, let's check it. I have no objections. Soon, the three-body life forms came to an agreement. Then, they stopped in space and began to open the forbidden zones in their memories. They wanted to see what kind of weapons their ancestors had left behind. However, when the gap in their memories was opened, these three-body life forms that were entrenched in space were all stunned and did not move for a while. 1 minute. 10 minutes. It took a full 10 minutes for a three-body creature to react. And quote this, "How is this possible?" And this was the first thing he said when he reacted. "It's actually like this?" And quote, the three-body civilization had such a history? No, that's impossible. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. We've always been the most powerful race. We are the... This history actually existed? After they came back to their senses, the three-body life forms were in an uproar. Furthermore, once this secret memory was activated, all the life forms in the three-body civilization would know at once. The effect was immediate. In an instant, the atmosphere in the entire Centaur constellation became strange. The secret had completely subverted their three views. Centaurs. All the three-body life forms were stunned. At this moment, their emotions were extremely complicated. On the one hand, he had found hope that he could be saved. He could guarantee that he wouldn't be devoured by Yi Bei's mutated beasts today. However, on the other hand, history was too hard to accept. This was because that was what the top secret memory described. End quote. Tens of thousands of years ago, the tri-body civilization was just a servant of the flood dragons in the high-level universe. After tens of thousands of years of development, one of the old flood dragons was sent to a low-level universe by his race because he violated the rules. He was seriously injured, and the flood dragon set up a domain for himself. He has been repairing himself in the centaurs. End quote. End quote. The three-body civilization has been continuously developing and storing powerful energy. In fact, we've been serving that flood dragon all this time. If I want to resurrect him, I just need to send over the crystal spaces of our three bodies. The energy stored in those space crystals is enough for the serpent dragon to recover its great strength." End quote. However, the price is very high. After surviving, the flood dragon will awaken, and all three-bodied beings will return to their status as servants. End quote. This was too much information. After receiving this message, almost all the three-body life forms went silent. To have evolved to their level, his body and technology were already powerful enough. Moreover, they were all intelligent life forms. For any life, dignity was extremely important, even more important than one's life. In order to survive, to become a flood dragon slave, this was simply impossible to do in a short time. What do we do? A three-body being took a deep breath and slowly asked after a long time. End quote. I don't know, but we've been free for so many years. Even if I die, I won't agree to be the slave of another life form. I'd rather die in battle with those monsters. End quote. As long as I'm alive, there's hope. Yes, isn't it recorded in the information? The flood dragon had been heavily injured, and it had been exiled from a high-leveled civilization. Even if all the energy was given to it, it would not be able to recover much power. We still have a chance. Then let's try? Well, being alive is everything. In a short period of time, the three-body life forms had thought about it tens of millions of times. In the end, there was no doubt about their choice. They all believed that being alive was everything. His so-called dignity was thrown to the side after a struggle in the face of his life. All right. End quote. Think of a way to send our crystal dimension to the WRM's coordinates through space technology. End quote. Inform everyone to prepare for action. When they reached an agreement, all the three-body creatures started to move. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. Boom. On Yi Bei's side of the battlefield, the mutated beasts originally had a certain advantage, and they were frantically devouring and reproducing. But suddenly, a large number of three-body creatures self-destructed without any warning. A terrifying energy storm was constantly filling the universe. Something's wrong. With every explosion, Golden Lion would quickly hide in the space fragments of the living tree. What do they want to do? Caesar gritted his teeth. Don't tell me. I'm going to give up. They're going to die either way. Are they prepared to maintain their so-called dignity at the last moment? Wang Wen flicked his tongue. Only Yi Bei, who had released his mental power domain, could see everything clearly. When a large number of three-body life forms self-destructed, a huge amount of energy constantly filled the universe. The mutated beasts, on the other hand, dodged one after another. At this time, many three-body life forms immediately used space jump technology and rushed towards the crystal planet where the resource repository was located. They want to absorb the energy from the crystal planet to complete their evolution. That was Yi Bei's first thought. But his reaction was still a little slow. By the time Yi Bei thought of this, the crystal planet had already been reduced to dust by the three-body life forms. They had been transported to another place through a miniature wormhole. Damn it, what are they trying to do? Upon seeing this, Yi Bei's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He had tasted the benefits of the crystal planet's rich energy. Without realizing it, Yi Bei had already treated that thing as his personal property. Now that it had been taken away by a three-body being, he was definitely upset. Hoo. However, just as Yi Bei's killing intent was boiling, an uneasy feeling rose from the bottom of his heart. At the same time, the entire Centaur constellation seemed to be suppressed by an extremely powerful and gloomy aura. Roar, roar, roar. In the domain space where the flood dragon was, his eyes, which were originally closed, suddenly opened again. Then, he roared loudly, and his eyes were filled with excitement. End quote. It's here, it's finally here. Such pure and powerful energy. Those three bodies didn't disappoint me. As long as I devour this energy, my body can recover at least 50%. End quote. The flood dragon opened its eyes wide and muttered to itself in a hoarse voice. Buzz. The next second, his domain space exploded. Then, the three-body civilization's crystal planet rushed over. The flood dragon didn't hesitate at all when it saw the huge crystal planet. Crack, crack. He opened his mouth wide. His body turned into a stream of light, and in the next second, there seemed to be a loud, cracking sound in the universe. The flood dragon's mouth bit down on the crystal planet. An incredible scene appeared. It was clearly a compressed spatial fragment, but after being bitten by the flood dragon, it actually swallowed the fragment along with it. It even made cracking sounds in its mouth. One could clearly feel that the energy overflowing from the fragment was extremely pure. Crack, crack. The flood dragon was still devouring. As the energy entered his body, the worm dragon, which had looked very old and even on the verge of death, was recovering at an unbelievable speed. The power in its body was increasing crazily, and its huge body was gradually filled with luster. Roar! In less than a minute, the entire crystal planet was completely devoured by the flood dragon. He let out a roar. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. Clack, clack, clack. The surrounding space shattered. Whoosh. When its aura had recovered to its peak, the flood dragon's eyes flashed with boundless killing intent. And quote, "It seems that my servants have encountered some trouble. As a report for sending me so much energy, I'll help them devour the enemy." End quote. As soon as it finished speaking, the flood dragon's body moved slightly in space and broke through the void directly. With an unbelievable speed, it headed straight for the battlefield. Boom, boom, boom. In space, the sound of explosions continued. The battle between the three-body life forms and the mutated beasts had reached an unprecedented level of intensity. A large number of three-body creatures were devoured by the crazy mutated beasts. The universe was filled with the aura of death. However, under such circumstances, the mutated beasts were devouring crazily. While they were evolving, they all felt something strange. Roar! The golden lion stood on the body of a three-body creature. Its mouth was full of blood, and boundless energy was constantly changing. However, it kept roaring uneasily. What's going on? I'm feeling very afraid. I'm even more uneasy than the first time I encountered the self-destruction of a three-body life form. I keep feeling like some powerful life form is rushing over here. Damn it! What's wrong? The roar turned into this sentence. Me too, Caesar said. And quote, "There's something wrong with these three-body life forms. They were all resisting just now, thinking that they had a chance to survive. But now, some of the three-body life forms that weren't attacked by us have self-destructed crazily. They don't care about their lives at all. What are they trying to do?" Wangwen flicked his tongue. At this moment, all the mutated beasts felt a sense of danger. It was a biological instinct. When facing an even more powerful and terrifying enemy, a certain element would be automatically secreted from the depths of the mind. When all the mutated beasts were feeling uneasy, and NBSB, whoosh, Yibei had naturally noticed the situation. He quickly released his spiritual power domain. What? When he sensed that the space around him was extremely unstable, Yibei's heart began to race. "System, what's going on?" Yibei asked. "A high-level creature is heading this way." The system didn't waste any time and said directly, "A high level. That's right, host. The WYRM in the Centaurs is still alive. The three-bodied beings transported the crystal planet away just now was actually using the powerful energy within to restore the WRM's body. Now, the WYRM is almost fully recovered." The system replied. What? After hearing this, Yibei's pupils shrank. The flood dragon was resurrected? Are you kidding me? Why didn't you tell me earlier? His voice was cold. The flood dragon had resurrected. Yibei's intuition told him that the creature's power was far beyond his imagination. User, if you want to become stronger, other than constantly devouring, battle is inevitable. With your current strength, it's not impossible for you to fight the flood dragon. The system said faintly. Yibei, who had been a little angry at first, froze for a moment when he heard this. Then, the anger in his eyes quickly subsided, replaced by calmness and indifference. That's right. Ever since his evolution began, and he had devoured an infinite amount of energy and obtained powerful abilities, Yibei had rarely encountered any powerful opponents. When he was on Research Island, he had encountered life-threatening situations many times, but didn't he manage to survive each time? I got it. After saying this, Yi Bei's gaze instantly became extremely determined. Chi. Walalala. As soon as he finished speaking, the vines of the universe tree extended wildly behind Yi Bei, and countless distorted spaces emerged from the tree trunk. Under the control of Yi Bei's boundless mental power, a distorted space magically appeared behind every mutated beast. As long as they wanted to, they could enter it at any time. And quote, everyone, continue devouring. Don't stand on ceremony. There's a very powerful creature rushing over right now. When the time comes, I'll deal with it personally. During this time, you can devour as much as you can and reproduce as many as you can. End quote. Yi Bei's voice resounded directly in the minds of all the mutated beasts, as they became more familiar with each other during this period of time, and the power of the territory. To a certain extent, Yi Bei had already formed a wonderful connection with all the mutated beasts in the entire snake tribe civilization. So, when they heard Yi Bei's voice, the uneasy mutated beasts instantly calmed down. I believe in the king. End quote. That's right. We just need to continue devouring. End quote. End quote. Explode. You guys, keep exploding. I'm no longer afraid of that power. The energy from the explosion, when devoured, is even more satisfying than eating meat. End quote. Gulyalu. In the universe, the mutated beasts once again entered a state of madness. The explosions of the three-body life forms continued. However, at the same time, these three-body life forms also felt an incomparably terrifying aura. He's here. Flood Dragon, can we really kill all these monsters? I'm feeling very uneasy. From the moment we sacrificed so much energy, we were destined to lose. Those three-body life forms communicated directly through high-tech means. The light membrane on their bodies pulsed with characters, which was extremely strange. Time was passing by. Whether it was the three-body life form or Yi Bei, both of them were the most solemn at this moment, because they knew what was coming. Crack, crack. 1 minute later. Finally, the majestic aura descended. Yi Bei was now entrenched in the universe tree, his eyes slightly narrowed. In his line of sight, he could clearly see the space in front of him shattering like a mirror. After that, a giant figure rushed out of the broken space. This was a flood dragon. When he saw the creature, Yi Bei's eyes couldn't help but widen. His pitch-black eyes were bloodshot, and the fighting spirit in his body instantly rose to its peak. The flood dragon looked too powerful. Lying in the universe, his body length was actually about the same as Yi Bei's, also 20,000 meters long. However, the metallic luster that was emitted from his body was even more vibrant. Furthermore, the skin on his back was dark blue, while the lower part of his body was white. He had 2 horns on his head and a long beard. His eyes, in particular, were like the vast starry sky, as if they could contain and devour everything. He was handsome, domineering, and his every move was filled with a perfect aura. God. Yes. This was Yi Bei's first reaction when he saw the flood dragon. The flood dragon had only existed in the legends of China. Now that he had seen it with his own eyes, the shock it brought was completely different. This fellow was far more powerful than he had imagined. Is this what I'm going to evolve into next? The blood in his body was boiling, and Yi Bei couldn't wait to take a bite out of the flood dragon. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. However, the flood dragon reacted very quickly. When he appeared in front of Yi Bei, his eyes narrowed slightly. End quote. A group of inferior creatures formed something similar to an insect army. They even made an inferior universe tree and beat my servants to the point where they couldn't fight back. What a joke. End quote. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. As his voice fell, the entire universe trembled slightly. Inferior creatures? Inferior universe tree? Boom, boom, boom. The flood dragon's voice wasn't very loud, but after it said this, the entire universe shook violently. The three-body creatures were trembling. As for the countless mutated beasts, after seeing the flood dragon lying in the universe, they were also shocked and could not come back to their senses for a long time. As for Yi Bei, when he heard the voice, he was momentarily dazed. However, Yi Bei quickly returned to his senses. He knew very well that if he were to weaken his momentum at this time, he would have no chance of winning. His eyes were wide open as he stared at the flood dragon. And quote, devour him. As long as I devour him, I can immediately evolve into a flood dragon. Furthermore, with my current body as a foundation, once I evolve into a flood dragon, I'll be even more powerful than this guy. End quote. And NBSB, whoosh. A threat meant hope. When his fear gradually subsided, there was only fanaticism left in Yi-Bei's eyes. His body even began to unconsciously exude a terrifying killing intent. Of course, the flood dragon immediately noticed Yi-Bei's gaze. When the flood dragon's gaze fell on Yi-Bei, it was clearly stunned for a moment. But very quickly, it was replaced by a look of contempt. I really didn't expect to meet a python that has evolved to your level in this low-end universe. Its body length should be at least 20,000 meters, right? If I'm not wrong, some kind of mutation occurred during the process of evolution. However, it's a pity that you've encountered me today, so you'll die. And NBSB, roar, roar, roar. As the flood dragon spoke, it was as if it was constantly roaring. The surrounding space kept collapsing, and a large number of fragments fell. This guy really knew a lot. When Yi-Bei heard this, he was rather surprised. This guy had actually seen through his situation with a single glance. And quote, I'm sorry, but I'm not sure who will die. A flood dragon is a high-level creature. Speaking of which, my main purpose for coming to the centaurs is to treat you as food. End quote. Chi. Yi-Bei said calmly, sticking out his forked tongue. You're looking for death. After hearing this, the flood dragon's killing intent instantly surged. He growled. Whoosh. As soon as he finished speaking, a huge black hole appeared in front of him, and it charged towards Yi-Bei at superluminal speed. He's too strong. End quote. Is this a creature from a high-tier universe? It's so scary. With just his physical body, he can shatter the space without any power. What level is his body strength at? I'm guessing that there's nothing in this universe that's tougher than his body. Didn't you notice before? We've accumulated crystal space planets for tens of thousands of years, but when they were sent to the front of this flood dragon, he just opened his mouth and ate it, as if he was eating ordinary food. Think about it. How much energy is there? When the worm dragon appeared, all the mutated beasts stopped. Meanwhile, the three-bodied creatures were communicating with each other through technology. It was extremely shocking. At the same time, they realized that they had really resurrected a terrifying and unsolvable demon. Except for the centaurs. In the depths of the universe, other creatures also discovered the situation here at the first moment. This is a higher life form, stronger than a three-body life form, or even stronger than us. Is this the legendary flood dragon? A space snake flicked its tongue, its eyes almost popping out. As he said this, his pupils contracted violently. A snake. In the end, it was just a snake. The flood dragon was a creature that was above the snake. Its genetic level was much stronger. However, while the space snake was shocked, its eyes were also flashing with greed. As the space snakes that roamed the universe, they were very clear that danger often corresponded with opportunity. If they could obtain some flood dragon bloodline this time, they might be able to strengthen the space snake race in all aspects. End quote. Speed up, hide your aura, and sneak into the Centaur constellation. Then, wait for an opportunity. End quote. Quick, we can't let the other creatures get there first. Hurry. In the universe, countless space snakes were communicating with each other through their spiritual power and made a decision. The space snake was just one of them. When the worm dragon appeared in the centaurs, in another galaxy with a large number of metal planets, there were also constant sounds. Flood dragon. Yes, according to our information, they are creatures from a high-tier universe. Can you kill him? I'm afraid it will be very difficult. Then, can we get his genes? End quote. That's not a problem. As long as we keep attacking, he'll get hurt. Even if he doesn't get hurt, with such a huge body, some dead skin will fall off. With that thing, we can completely decode their genes. End quote. End quote. Very good. Continue with the mission. If the creatures in the Milky Way can survive, don't let them go. It'll be good if you have the chance to get the genes of the flood dragon. Of course, it'll be even better if you can kill the flood dragon and bring it back. End quote. All right, I got it. In the universe, if anyone could look from a higher dimension, they would be surprised to find that with the centaurs as the center. Around him, There were countless light spots that were gathering in that direction at superluminal speed. Every single life form was incomparably powerful. Every life was filled with all sorts of selfish motives and thoughts. As for the centaurs, Yi-Bei was currently staring at the flood dragon. Yi-Bei's body was 20,000 meters long, and when he was coiled up on the living tree, he looked very small. The flood dragon, on the other hand, was lying in the void with an extremely turbulent aura. Since you're looking for death, then go to hell. Roar. An explosive roar. Crack, crack, crack. Boom, boom, boom. The space in front of the flood dragon was completely shattered. Even many three-body creatures in the surroundings couldn't bear the terrifying roar at all. Under extremely painful circumstances, they exploded with a rumble. The entire Centaur constellation had become a terrifying harvesting field. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. As for the flood dragon, it immediately charged towards Yi-Bei with its terrifying body without any hesitation. He knew very well that Yi-Bei was the most powerful person present today, and he was also the main culprit behind the chaos in the Centaur constellation. End quote. Living tree, protect those space fragments. You must not let them suffer any damage. Also, don't be polite. Absorb as much of that explosive energy from the universe as you can. The stronger you evolve, the better. End quote. Narrowing his eyes, Yi-Bei looked at the flood dragon charging at him. The first thing he did was give the living tree some instructions. Then, a terrifying killing intent burst out in the universe on some three-body life forms. Although the flood dragon had appeared, there were still many mutated beasts who stayed outside. Yi-Bei's apostles were the same. That's the legendary flood dragon? He's too terrifying. I don't know why, but the moment I saw him, I felt like I was facing a true king. It's as if he's not on the same level as us. The golden lion's fur stood on end as it growled. End quote. Me too. I only had this kind of instinct when I was still an ordinary creature. For example, I saw my natural enemy. End quote. Wang Wen flicked his tongue, his eyes cold. No matter what, the winner today will be the king. If the king can't beat him, we're all finished. Caesar gritted his teeth. What should we do now? Should he go over and help the king? Don't forget, we are apostles. Moreover, after devouring so much energy, our bodies have become extremely strong. We might not be able to defeat that flood dragon, but we can at least cause some trouble for him. Of course, if our entire snake civilization attacks together, we have at least an 80% chance of winning. The blood moon opened its mouth and flapped its wings, its aura soaring. But, just as the apostles were wondering if they should help, Yi-Bei's voice rang out in their minds without restraint. This flood dragon's opponent is me. Without my order, all of you can just watch from the side. Yi-Bei's voice was cold, and he sounded like he was giving orders. Yes. The apostles stopped discussing and continued to devour the three-body life form. Walala. On the other side, in the universe, the living tree that had reached a height of 1,000,000 meters had countless roots twisting and swaying. It was absorbing extremely violent power at every moment, and its body was growing bigger with every minute and second. Yi-Bei's eyes were as sharp as blades as he sat on the living tree. Chi-chi. With a slight thought. In the next second, all of the spikes on Yi-Bei's back were revealed. After evolving to his current stage, those thorns were like the sharpest blades. They glittered with cold light and were extremely terrifying. Especially with his super strong body, he was like a 20,000-meter-long sharp sword in space that could cut the entire universe. Hiss! In the distance, the mutated beasts, who had been burying their heads and devouring the food, couldn't help but raise their heads. When they saw Yi-Bei's current appearance, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. Their king was much more powerful than they had imagined. End quote. I've never realized that the king's spine could be so powerful. I feel that even if all the mutated beasts of our snake civilization were to move out and surround the king, under those sharp spines, we would end up like vegetables being cut, and our blood would flow like a river. End quote. A mutated turtle said, his eyes filled with fear. After his evolution, his tortoiseshell had become extremely hard, and it could be said to have the strongest defense. But the moment he saw Yi-Bei's sharp spikes, he lost all confidence. The dagger is only one of the king's methods. The king's abilities far exceed our imaginations. A mutated ant waved its feelers as it spoke, its voice trembling. And quote, "Yes, I've been following the king since Research Island. The king has won countless impossible wars, and this time will definitely be no exception. I have a feeling that the king will show us an even more incredible ability today." End quote. A reticulated python flicked its tongue, its eyes filled with anticipation. End quote. "This is our king. His current aura is much stronger than that flood dragon." End quote. "Yes, yes." End quote. "That flood dragon's body is so big, so its genes must be very strong. If we defeat it later and eat its meat, it will definitely feel very good. Maybe we will go through a few more genetic evolutions." End quote. "I'm looking forward to it. You must win." At that moment, countless mutated beasts were looking forward to it. As for the flood dragon that was charging toward Yi Bei, when it saw the spikes on Yi Bei's back, it still looked at him with disdain. "It seems that you're not an ordinary python. However, a snake is a snake. No matter how powerful you are, you can't cross the gap between races. Trash will always be trash." The flood dragon let out a low roar, and as soon as it finished speaking, its speed increased. At the same time, his eyes were filled with a crazed appetite. After all, in the flood dragon's eyes, Yi Bei's body was also an extremely rich resource, as well as an extremely delicious food. And NBSP, whoosh whoosh whoosh. The distance was getting closer and closer. The living tree wrapped itself around Yi Bei. Walala. Countless vines danced in the air, constantly blocking the flood dragon's attacks. But, although the living tree's vines were already extremely strong and were even covered in metal, they were no different from tofu when faced with the flood dragon's attack. They were easily smashed into pieces. Of course, there was simply too much energy in outer space. The living tree that had been smashed to pieces instantly recovered, and it was endless. On the other side, Yi Bei didn't stop after he showed the dagger. Roar. The low growling continued. His pitch-black eyes turned blood red. Buzz. Two sharp, venomous fangs appeared at the corner of his mouth with a swoosh. The venomous fangs looked extremely white and shiny. However, it was clear that it contained an extremely terrifying energy. Of course, this was far from enough. Yi Bei's ability to spit fire had evolved to this level. In the next second, his entire body seemed to be enveloped in scorching and terrifying flames. And the temperature kept rising. Crackling. After the flames appeared, lightning began to flash in the flames, making crackling sounds. "This is too terrifying. I feel that the king's current aura is not any weaker than that flood dragon." End quote. "It's as if special effects have been added to his body. It's incredible." End quote. End quote. Unbelievable. This is the power of a living creature. Even if technology continues to develop, it's still super difficult to achieve this. The king's strength is simply unfathomable. End quote. Countless mutated beasts were discussing at the entrance. And in the universe, when the three-body life forms discovered Yi Bei's transformation, they were also extremely shocked. What is this guy's body made of? Damn it. Before this, those monsters could all breathe fire and even discharge electricity. End quote. It's definitely not accurate to measure these guys simply by their creature rank. End quote. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. Damn it. The flood dragon will definitely win. Don't forget that a simple roar from the flood dragon can shatter the void. If he were to launch an attack, even the most ordinary attack wouldn't be weaker than the self-destruction of our three-body life forms. The three-body creatures said one after another. Boom. As soon as they finished speaking, the flood dragon destroyed countless vines, and its huge body crashed into Yi Bei with a loud bang.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.